who are participating uh, either via their computers or via phone. You can also go to the toolbar up at the top of your screen with the little icon that in somebody's imagination depicts people. You can click on the participants and it should bring down a screen on the right.
There we go. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks, Dan. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I don't think it can be overstated the significance of what we are beginning today. We are, as the newly seated board of directors of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, embarking on launching the first passenger rail authority of its kind ever in the history of the state of Montana. And it's a compliment to all of the 12 participating counties that stretch from Sanders in the west all the way to Webo on the far eastern edge of the state, and many counties in between, to their interest and willingness to entertain what it is that we can do collectively that we cannot accomplish individually as isolated counties. So this is a big deal, and my hat's off to all of the respective governing bodies that took this step. Some of their county commissioners are on the line today. In other cases, their board appointees for this Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority are other members and constituents of their counties. So welcome to you all. Dan Clark from MSU's Local Government Center will be helping us get started today. I think many of you in your capacities as representatives in local government have worked with Dan before, and his group out of Bozeman has done a great job in working with us here locally in our neck of the woods, and I'm sure many of you can attest the same also in your respective communities. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dan Clark. And for anyone on the line who does not know me, I guess I didn't introduce myself. I'm Dave Strohmeyer, County Commissioner out of Missoula County, Montana.
Thanks, Dave. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name's Dan Clark, and I'll be facilitating / moderating today's meeting. So hopefully we can create an efficient environment where we can get a lot of stuff done today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and there we go. I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a little PowerPoint. And all of you went away. I've got to find you now. There you are. Okay, so I've got this PowerPoint. I'd like to. Now, what is it that you see? Do you see my speaker notes, or do you see the PowerPoint?
There, we see the PowerPoint.
Okay, there we go. Great. All right. So first off, yeah, so welcome. We're meeting in this virtual world. I'm sure all of you would prefer, if it weren't such a hassle traveling, but to do this in person, to connect, to meet, to discuss these things face to face, I think would be far preferred than the alternative that we're experiencing today. But given the circumstance that we find ourselves in, this is a great forum for us to continue working, engaging, and discussing important matters and issues that we face in our communities. I think it's great that you folks, in spite of the current conditions, decided to move forward with this, and that shows a real leadership in your respective counties and interested in the future and how can you be a part of shaping that future. So my hat is off to all of you and the leadership that you've demonstrated. And I hope that we can set this board up, this Passenger Rail Authority up for success. And it's not often that we create something like this rail authority. Didn't exist before. We don't have a lot of examples in Montana of something exactly like this. So I hope all of you are willing and interested in helping shape, create, form, define what this rail authority will be. And I think today will be the first step on a journey that we'll go through as we try to put some sideboards and some framework around the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority so that you can be effective moving forward. So just to set the tone for you is in your expectations, I would expect this first few, and I don't want to put a real stiff timeline on it, but several meetings, it may take several meetings of this group or subcommittee work to really flesh out who is it that you are, the governing structure that you're going to operate in, roles and responsibilities. And I think as you make that initial investment at the beginning of this process, it will pay huge dividends in the future. As issues come up, roles, responsibility, or some issue comes up, hopefully you in the beginning days anticipated that happening and created a structure or a framework for those opportunities or issues that present themselves to kind of work through that. And I think that will allow you then to focus as a rail authority on the work of the rail authority once you establish your governance and process at the beginning. So I guess this point is it's kind of the roll up your sleeves time to figure out how is it that we're going to structure ourselves so that we can have success in that work in the future. So with that little bit of context, what I'd like to do now is to go through introductions, and I'll just ask the board members. I've got a list here of the board members, and we'll just go through and I'll call out your name. And if you could then share with us your name, the county or community that you are from or representing, both of those would be great. Why you're interested in serving on the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority Board. What drew you to it? Why are you part of this? Why do you want to have this seat at the table? And then what excites you about the potential, the future, the opportunities that this Passenger Rail Authority may present to our state and to your community and county and your region. So I think this initial meeting in this particular time now is really for us as a group to get to know each other, to figure out what motivates us, to understand where we're from geographically, and try to find some connections and links. This is a lot easier to do this in person, but we'll do what we can in this virtual setting to kind of create this bond and this connection amongst the board, because I think there's going to be a lot of work moving forward, and it's going to be helpful for you to have those initial connections, to build some level of trust amongst you as a board and as a group, so that will make your efforts more effective and more efficient moving forward. So with that, I'm going to start off, and I'll call your name, and if you could please, if you're present, please unmute yourself and give us an introduction as I've outlined here on the slide. So let's start with Jerry McDonald from Sanders County.
Hello, everyone. Jerry McDonald, Sanders County. The opportunity to serve on this board really is it's just an opening for me to participate in something that's a bit historic in a meaningful way, and that's exciting. I have a family history in rail that goes back to the 1880s in Montana, and so it's it sure is a great opportunity to be part of that, and it's an opportunity also for me to give something back to my local community. I know that Sanders County can be very well served by rail transportation. I know that all economic development follows transportation, and just hoping that this has an opportunity to kind of move forward and be embraced by the rest of Montana, the rest of the community in Sanders County, and hopefully, end up in something that is that's beneficial to all and has persistence. You get all that?
Yes, thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. And I'll just do a quick reminder. We'll cover this further in in ground rules, but if you're not invited to speak, I'd appreciate if you could just mute your sound so that everyone else can hear the speaker when they're unmuted. So if you're not speaking, please go ahead and mute yourself now. Next on my list from Missoula County is Dave Strohmeyer.
Yeah. Hi again. Thanks, Dan. As I mentioned earlier, there are few opportunities where we can work together geographically on this scale across the state of Montana, and particularly in this kind of fractious political and social environment that we find ourselves in these days. It's a testament, I think, to our ability to work across geographic and ideological boundaries to accomplish something big. We can still think big and accomplish big things. And for me, passenger rail is something that many of us on this line might have experienced up until 1979 and may have firsthand personal experience of in the southern tier of Montana. A lot of folks don't have that institutional knowledge or memory, and it's a matter of kind of reigniting the possibilities of what might be in the future. I see this as a great opportunity economically for our state, to be able to provide transportation options for our constituents, for our friends and neighbors. And it's, again, a rare opportunity that we are at the beginning process of creating a governing body. For those of you who are out there who are elected officials, you and me too inherited institutions and processes that someone else created for us, and probably any of you who are not serving an elected office have experienced that in organizations that you're affiliated with. So we have an opportunity to really shape this in a way that we think benefits Montana, that helps create our own destiny. And I'm super excited in the midst of so much bad news these days to be working on something that is just super positive, I think. And it may not happen in the next 1 year or 5 years, but getting passenger rail service back here is going to be built upon the foundation of what we are doing today.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate those comments. Let's next go to Sean Fredrickson from Butte Silverboat.
Hi, Dan. Thanks. And thanks to Dave for getting us all together, and Missoula County in particular for kind of spearheading this whole entire new thing. My name's Sean Fredrickson. I'm Butte Silverbow County Commissioner, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes. I've ridden passenger rail a few different times. Whitefish to Portland, and then I lived in Portland for a little bit, and we would take the train up to Portland and Seattle multiple times to go to baseball games, and I think there's not a finer way to travel. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do with this. And Buttes obviously has a rich history with the railroads, and would really like to see that come back here. So happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, Sean. Let's go next to Mary Hensley, Jefferson County, representing Jefferson County, and the mayor of Whitehall. Mary, you with us?
She's there.
Are you there, Mary? All right. Well, I don't hear Mary. So if you're out there, just holler up at some point. We'll slip you in there, Mary. Next, representing Broadwater County is Daryl Fulford.
Easier. There we go. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, and exciting to be a part of this opportunity. My name's Daryl Fulford, Commissioner with Broadwater County. And I guess I view this as an opportunity to be a part of reestablishing passenger rail service in the southern part of Montana again. And, I guess as a kid, I remember traveling by rail, and I have those fond memories. And I think that this could be something that would be exciting for others that possibly want to visit our state and give them another opportunity to travel to Montana and see maybe a part of the state that they can't see if they're traveling by car. So anyway, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this, and I look forward to participating on this board.
Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you.
Next from Gallatin County, Scott McFarling.
Good afternoon, everybody. Scott McFarland, Gallatin County Commission. The simple answer for why I'm here is I was the commissioner that argued that we should be participating, so I'm the one that gets to participate. The more complicated answer is that as Gallatin County and Bozeman is one of the economic centers along the southern tier there, certainly think that we ought to be a part of any conversations that are happening in here. There's a lot of energy in our community. It's been amazing just since these first few press releases have come out and the first few news articles about how much activity, how many public comment we've got, how many really encouraging community members there are that want to get involved, want to participate, want to know what's going on. It's been a really motivating and positive thing in our community. There's really no reason to not be participating, I think, regardless of the feelings or maybe difference of opinions through our board. Everybody agreed that participation was still the necessary thing to do, to be a part of this group. I'm encouraged, I'm optimistic and motivated, so I'm the one that gets to be here.
Great, Scott. Happy to have you. At least they didn't appoint you because you did attend a meeting. You missed the meeting and they put you on the board. So, all right. So glad to have you on the board there, Scott. Next, Park County, Bill Berg.
Happy New Year, everyone. And thanks to Missoula County for setting this up. Dave, I know this has been a heavy lift and it's months in the making. And Park County unanimously approved joining this, and we're proud to be part of it. I came to Yellowstone for a summer job in the early 70s. My fourth summer, I rode the train from Wilmer, Minnesota to Livingston, Montana, not realizing that that opportunity would soon be gone. It kind of feels to me a little bit like a Back to the Future experience here. It's already been 30 years since I rode the bullet train in Japan. And at that time, I remember thinking, wow, what a fantastic way to travel. Not just the experience itself, but the efficiency of it, the economic benefits, and the cultural, the history is pretty impressive. As previous members said, his family history in the rails goes back to the 1880s in Montana. Trains rolled into Gardner in 1903, Livingston, I think, in the 1880s. And I just think this is a terrific opportunity, and it seems like a big lift, but there's already track there. There's all kinds of history. It's a proven, efficient transportation method, and the only mistake is not to try.
Great, thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. Next on our list, Prairie County, Deanna Brockness. Deanna, are you out there?
She's here, but she's gone mute. I hit that mute button.
Now try
Oh,
them now.
Okay, yeah, I'm Deanna Bachnes. I have our other two commissioners here, Todd Devlin and Christine Keltner. And I'm excited to be on this board because, mostly because my dad was, worked for the railroad for 37 years, and many of our family vacations were on the train. So then I'm also excited because in our part of the world, a lot of people need transportation. You know, our bus lines aren't very good here. It'd be nice for medical, you know, for people to be able to travel to medical appointments and billings and other areas. It just seems like a really good thing. So.
Great. Thanks, Deanna. Jason Stewart from Dawson County.
Hi, everybody. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Strohmeyer and the good folks in Missoula County for all their hard work in pulling together this organization. As he mentioned, the first of its kind in the state of Montana, and I look forward to being a part of this. Personally, you know, my personal interest in serving on the board, my academic training is actually as an historian, and I think as part of that, I've always, since I was a kid, and I was born after long distance train service mostly had dried up in this country. I've always felt always found a bit puzzling and somewhat sad that this country, which basically invented and perfected long distance rail travel, ultimately abandoned it while the rest of the Western world kept rolling with it. So I'm excited to be part of this board. Just for that reason, to be a small part of trying to rectify that somewhat and bring passenger rail service back to the forefront of our transportation infrastructure. For the future of the rail authority and rail travel through southern Montana, as an economic developer here in Glendive, Dawson County, we just see enormous potential for this, for our region, for our community, for our wider region, and for the state. We here at the DC EDC, we really believe that Glendive has it in itself to reposition itself to be a premier tourism and outdoor recreation destination. We're always seeing that. We had Makoshka State Park went over 100,000 visitors for its first time in its history this year. And this would just be a big help to that goal of turning this community and this region into a major stopping point for the tourists who right now mostly drive by on the interstate, but we want to try to get more of them here, and we believe that this would be a big help. And also, as I forget her name, but Leigh from Perry County mentioned, our citizens need other options to travel. Right now, the only way for me to get, or anyone to get from here to Helena, our state capital, is by car. That's it. There's no other way. And that's a 450-mile drive. And during the winter months, when our legislative session happens to be, it can be pretty much near impossible to make that drive, depending on the weather. So for all those reasons, we're excited to be part of this effort.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Next on our list would be Edward Anderson from Weebo County.
Hi, name's Edward Anderson. I'm representing Weebo County as one of the commissioners here. And I'm doing this because I'd like to be part of bringing it back. As someone who's traveled trains all over Europe and spent time working them as an MP in Berlin, it's a great way to travel. And our older communities really need the alternative way to get back and forth to places with medical, like they said. And I think it'd just be good for the whole area. And I'd like to be part of bringing it back. That's it.
Great, thanks, Edward. Next, representing Granite County is Bill Slaughter.
So good afternoon, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. Initially, this was kind of a dead-on-arrival idea in the Granite County Commission, and then we got Dave on the phone and spent a little time with him, and he got us excited. Granite County is a traditionally railroad county. There's a spur to Phillipsburg, and there was a lot of traffic through Drummond back in the day. But personally, what got me excited is that I used to listen to stories of my mom and dad, a bobcat and a grizzly, when they had trains. It had to be like in 1938, 1940, somewhere in there, where one train would leave Bozeman and one would leave Missoula, and they meet in Butte, and they dump about 1,000 kids each, and they'd go and have a football game. And then they'd blow the whistle about just before midnight. Everybody get back on their train, and they would go home. Now stop and think about that. In the middle of winter and bad roads in Montana, what a better designated driver. I mean, they had it figured out back then. You know, we've really improved on that. So we take several thousand kids and put them in a car and go to Bozeman, or we go to Missoula on crappy roads, and then they drink all day and drive home, and we wonder why we're killing everybody on the highway. So that, to me, I thought, you know, it's time to look at some of the greater ideas of transportation, and, you know, getting to the legislature. That was a great comment, because I know days when I was representing the sheriffs, I could not get from Bozeman to the legislature. So, you know, I think it impedes government. I think, you know, certainly economically, we have some real opportunities here. So I'm excited about it, and we want to stay involved and you know, be at the table.
Sounds great, Bill. Hadn't thought about that as a designated driver. That's a new way of looking at it, but I appreciate that sentiment. All right, finally, thank you for your patience, Terry, but we're going to hear from Terry Jennings, Powell County, next.
Happy New Year, everybody. This is a huge honor to be here for this. You know, I'm Terry Jennings. I represent Powell County. I'm currently the president of Discover Deer Lodge, and I'm a past member of the Deer Lodge City Council. And of all the boards and committees I've had the honor to be a part of, this one is in my wheelhouse. I worked my way through college on Montana Rail Link. Went to Montana State, and I worked on tie gang, steel gang, surfacing crews. Out of college, I spent 8 years working down in the main office for Montana Rail Link in Missoula. Both my grandfathers were locomotive engineers on the Milwaukee, and my dad was a locomotive engineer on the Milwaukee and Montana Rail Link. And the thing that really grabs me is my grandpa Jennings was actually held a turn as a passenger engineer on the Milwaukee. He ran from Deer Lodge to Avery, Idaho. So with that, the lines we're going to talk about, I've worked on from basically Laurel, Montana to Sandpoint, Idaho. And I'm excited about this because it's going to create an economic aspect for Southern Montana. I think that this isn't going to just pull people in. It's satellite businesses will pop up off of this, and I think that's going to benefit communities. And it's just it's an honor to be a part of this, and I want to thank Missoula County and Dave for pulling this together, and I look forward to working with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate the thoughts. You know, as many of you have mentioned, your relationship and connections to the railroad, it just made me realize that my great-grandfather, maternal grandfather, worked the rail lines in Big Timber and Livingston for good 20 years. Had a ranch in Big Timber, and he and most of the family passed away during the last pandemic in the 1919. So they're all buried in the cemetery there in Big Timber, and I just realized his connection to the railroad. So it all kind of runs deep for all of us, it seems like. All right, so I appreciate everyone's contributions to this introductions, and it's nice to hear the connections and to hear why it is you're interested in supporting this effort and being part of this board. And as you all know, this is a public agency. It's a public board, and it can falls under the jurisdiction of the Montana Constitution and the provisions of right to know and right to participate. And so I think what would be helpful now is that we'll open up the floor to public comment. We'll allow some time for members of the public who are here to to comment on anything that's on the agenda or anything that's not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the rail authority. We know the jurisdiction, we still are working out the framework, but I think we'll just open it up for a little bit of time for public comment. And if you are a member of the public and would like to make a comment, if you could please raise your hand. I think there is a, at the top of your screen, there is a hand. If you can click on that, I will try to recognize you. If you're calling on the phone, I'm not sure how we'll get you on there, but we'll give you an opportunity. So we'll try to figure out how to get everybody a chance to speak and to share your comments. So is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? You can also open up or turn your video on and let us see you and wave your hand, and we'll put you on that way as well. Okay, I'll ask for public comment another time.
Hello.
There we go. Who's speaking? If you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what community or county you live in, and then share with us your comment.
This is Kent Watson. I'm in Missoula. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Kent.
Thank you. Well, as Dave knows, he and I have been talking about this for years. I had the pleasure of riding the North Coast Hiawatha from Seattle all the way to Minneapolis through this southern route. And oh my gosh, it was a wonderful ride. It was climbing Pipestone Pass from out of Butte in a rain snow mixed type of storm, typical Montana weather, and being able to practically reach out and touch those big rock formations as we crept up that grade over the Continental Divide. It was a wonderful thing to be able to do that. And so, being a native myself, I was born in Livingston. I grew up in the park and got to know the NP Yellowstone line to Gardner and watch the trains come up there. It was a wonderful experience to see all that. So to have this authority in place now to get this going is a wonderful thing, and I'm delighted that you all are meeting, and I look forward to good things, and anything I can do as a volunteer to help, I'm there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent, for your comment and for your willingness to help in a way. So did you have your hand? Did you have your hand up, Kent? Was that yours with your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I figured out how to do it on the phone.
Yeah, that's fine. Appreciate that. Yeah, is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Okay, last call for public comment. All right, well, thank you all that are attending. I see on our list here, we have, I don't know, last I looked was like 36 participants on this. So that's great. And I appreciate your interest in this.
Oh, Dan, it looks like there's a hand up.
Oh, is there a hand? Oh, there we go. I see someone's got their hand up. Go ahead, whomever that is, and unmute yourself and go ahead and make your comment. Dan
Hi,
Bucks.
I'm Dan Bucks from Missoula, and I just want to say I'm really inspired by this, by all of you. You have a great sense of history as well as a vision of what rail service, expanded rail service could do for your communities in the state. And I think as a citizen, I'm really very encouraged by what you're all doing, and just want you to know that there's support out there for this effort. And I won't belabor the point. I'll just say that as you work to make this vision a reality, you'll of course face practical issues for which there's different points of view. And I would just urge you to keep in mind the common spirit that joined you together in this call, and take the time just to listen carefully to each other to develop a common approach that has consensus support from as many of you, all of you as possible. You're doing great work, and thank you very much for your undertaking this effort.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate those comments. Anyone else? Scanning for any hands up. All right, I see that there's 49 people participating, including the board. That's great. All right. Well, let's, I'm assuming you can still see my screen or not?
Yes.
You can see my screen. Great. All right. Let's see what the next slide says. All right. So the outcomes of this meeting today is what we just accomplished, the first one, where we're meeting the board members, getting a chance to hear their story and make those connections. The next, we're just going to give kind of an overview, a little context, make sure everybody's on the same page relative to the founding resolution that created the board, the relevant Montana Code annotated references that define a rail authority, and that the scope of that authority. So we're going to try to paint that picture that allows you to see what it is that you're empowered to do. And this may also be a good review for the public as they're participating and watching. They can understand and see what it is that you have the authority to do and define those expectations. We'll do a brief orientation for the board of directors so that you can figure out what it is that your role is as board members, and then discuss the organization developing a timeline for action. So this is kind of that just initial kind of understand the framework that we're operating in. And I think there's yet to be done a tremendous amount of work to organize and stand up this committee or this authority. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, that there's going to be a bit of work to do that. But I think once that's done, then your focus can be on the more implementation action. What is it that we're going to do relative to the rail and the bringing rail back into the southern part of the state of Montana? And I think that's what drives everyone to the table. They're all excited about rail and passenger rail. No one's excited about making bylaws. I'll just tell you that. No one's excited about making bylaws, but that has to be done. As I said earlier, if you get that done and do a good job at that, it's going to make the work, the fun work of this authority so much better because you've created that structure and framework. So those are the desired outcomes of today's session. I do have some ground rules, and I just threw some of these together for you to review. They're not hard and fast on my end, and I'm looking to the board members to decide what it is that you want to define for you in your participation. But as mentioned, for these types of online meetings, having your mute on is very helpful, and then turning it off when you have something to say, and then going back to mute. The success of this board is going to depend on your participation and your efforts. And so we're really asking the best of each of you. We want the best of you at the table, contributing, participating, thinking, listening, and trying to wrestle with this complex, multifaceted, three-dimensional issue of passenger rail in Montana. So it's not easy, and if it were, we wouldn't be having this board established, right? It would already be happening. So so we want the best of you. And I just realized that I put this, as I'm saying this now, being present I think is important. I want you present, I want you engaged. But the camera's on thing, I'm starting to realize that not everyone may have access to high quality internet, and it might be a challenge for you to have your camera on all the time. But I would ask, if you are making a comment, if you can turn your camera on so we can see you. I think for the board members, that would be really, really helpful. And if you have the ability to have your camera on throughout the meeting, that would be great. So the other are just traditional, typical ground rules: being respectful, trying to listen, actively listen to what is being said, trying to understand what's being said. And we all struggle sometimes with the words we're using, and we're trying to convey a particular thought, and we're struggling with finding the words. And so I'm asking you to try to hear what they're trying to say in their intent more as much as what they're actually saying. And try to keep one person at a time from speaking. Again, raise your hand if that's possible, or you can just wave at me and say, "Hey, Dan, I've got something to say," and I'll give you the floor. This idea of adopting a position of inquiry. we often will have a tendency to throw up barriers. And I want you to say, look, let's just inquire into what's going on. Ask questions, try to figure out what is this idea, concept, where are you coming from? But I want you to have that adopt a position of inquiry rather than resistance. Lean into what's possible. Say what you have to say, but use efficient speech. Try not to repeat yourself. And try not to repeat yourself. And then again, don't repeat yourself. You see where I'm coming from. All right. Take care of yourself. Misery is optional. These 2-hour blocks can be a bit of a challenge if you need to, do something that, take care of some biological need. Just you can turn your camera off, maybe send a little message out to the group saying, hey, I'm going to take a 2-minute break. I'll be right back. Next, I want you to question ideas, not motives. Focus on outcomes, not on people. And then you determine how enjoyable this process is. So those are the ground rules. Is there any other ground rules you think might be helpful for the board to consider and adopt as you move forward for these next few meetings until we can get an established bylaws? Anything you'd like to add to this? All right. Well, I think the rule of thumb is when I ask a question, I've got to wait 8 seconds. Let people try to find their mute button. So I apologize if there's a lengthy pause, but I'm allowing people an opportunity to unmute and get into the fray, so to speak. So we'll just use these as a way for you to keep that in mind as we're moving forward with these next few sessions until something more formal gets adopted by the board. All right. So director orientation, what is a rail authority? So some of this will be just kind of explanation. We'll go through the relevant MCA, as I mentioned earlier, the founding resolution. We'll review the role of directors. We'll look at the map of the authority. I'll just briefly review the open meetings and citizen participation law. I'm hoping everyone recognizes this is a subdivision of government that you just like your county commission and your city councils and everyone else, you have those same obligations. When a quorum is meeting, you're in an official meeting. It needs to be noticed in minutes and all those things. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But so let's talk about the relevant Montana Code annotated. And I think I have that as a handout. And I highlighted a few things just for ease of review. And I would encourage you, this was in your packet that you received, the board packet. So if you have it, you'd like to pull it out or pull it up on another screen if you've got two screens. But just to give you an idea, whenever you're looking at the Montana Code annotated, usually they're broken up by sections. And I always look for the first couple of parts within that section. It has what they call definitions. It's helpful when you're using and looking at the law that there are certain words that might have a variety of meanings, and that creates ambiguity. So I always encourage people when they're looking at the Montana Code annotated to go back and look at the definitions. When it uses a word, that word has a legal meaning. So in this case, board, whenever in this section it refers to the board, it's referring to the Board of County Commissioners. When it refers to directors, it's referring to the authority. So when you look through this, I just want to bring that to your attention because sometimes you might see them as interchangeable or synonymous, but they're not. When it refers to a board, it's the county commission. When it refers to the directors, it's you, the board of directors for the rail authority. All right, purpose for the government and governmental function. So they usually have a purpose. Why do you exist? When you create yourself, you have a purpose, a specific purpose. So if you'll notice in the resolution, they used a lot of the language out of the law, right? Because you can only go as far as the law, the Montana Code annotated, will allow you to go. So that, in a broad sense, provides this outer ring that you can operate within this ring as a rail authority. And this purpose helps define what that ring looks like. Now, as a board, you might want to tighten that ring up. You might want to say, look, although we may have certain authorities granted to us by the law, we currently choose to only exercise these particular authorities. That is at your purview. But I just want you to recognize that you do have a broader scope, or you have a broad scope that you can operate in, and you can choose to limit that at your pleasure. But the purpose of the authority is to provide for the preservation and improvement. Those are two important words, preservation and improvement. Everything that you do has to fit within that defined role and scope. Are we preserving it, or are we improving what exists? So the preservation and improvement of abandoned rail service for agriculture, industry, or passenger traffic. So those are the three areas that you can operate in. And so how you define the work you do, well, the work you do has to fall within the definition of we're working in the area of agriculture, industry, or passenger traffic. All right, so those are the two things, the few things I wanted to highlight there that kind of gives you that framework: passenger rail, agriculture, industry, preservation, improvement. So that's that big picture. All right. There's the process of developing the resolution. There is the ability for a county to create its own rail authority. In this case, we created a regional rail authority, not a county rail authority. So we're operating at a regional level. And the directors, so this is you as this board, you have particular powers as directors. And the powers of the authority are vested in the directors of the authority, and a majority of the directors constitutes a quorum for the purpose of conducting business. Action may be taken by the authority upon a vote of not less than a majority of the directors present. So what that means is if a quorum constitutes, Dave, you got 12 members, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so 12. We need to add a 13th so we can have an odd number to break ties. Anyway, so you have 12 members. So what would be a majority of the 12-member board? 7. Sorry, you're all on mute. 7. So 7 members are required in order for you to have a legal meeting. And then it says action may be taken by the authority upon a vote of not less than a majority of the directors present. So if Dory's on here to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like if 7 is required for a board, then a majority of those present, you can have 4 members voting in the affirmative to pass a resolution of a 12-member board. That's that outer ring that the state provides you, that the law provides you. You as a body may decide in your ground rules or your bylaws that you would like to make it a majority of the board or not, keep it as it is. That is one of those areas of flexibility that you have to determine how are we going to make decisions. But it gives you that option, and I think you might find it's maybe very challenging for a 12-member board that has potential to grow to all meet together, and this provides you that flexibility to meet and be able to make decisions without the onerous having the whole body present. All right, so there must be you have an officers, an executive team or officers here. You've got a presiding officer, a vice presiding officer, a treasurer, and a secretary. So at some point in the future, you need to elect a presiding officer, a vice presiding officer, secretary, and treasurer. So I want you to be thinking about of your 12 members, who, would you be willing to serve in one of those roles? And I'll just be honest with you, we don't know what those roles are yet. So this is very much going to be an uncomfortable chicken and egg scenario that you're going to have to build the plane while you're flying it. So just consider that you may put terms on there. For the first terms might be a year, and then after that terms may be 2 years or 3 years, whatever you want to do. But just maybe for this initial term, we're going to have a short term for that initial officer slate to just get ourselves standing up as a board, and then we'll have an opportunity to restructure after that. Those are just some things for you to consider as you're contemplating your bylaws and rules of procedure. The other thing to consider here is that once you're up and running, you may employ people to support the board. So an executive director, technical experts, you can contract with engineering firms, whomever. So you have that authority to hire and surround yourself with staff and contractors to support your work. So that's within the purview of the authority. And your authority may delegate powers to those individuals. For example, you may at some point have an executive director and staff. And so you may delegate certain responsibilities to that executive director to manage staff and do other day-to-day operational stuff. And the board reserves the decision-making for the broader direction of the authority. Cooperation with counties. I'll let you read some of these. These are just highlights I wanted to bring to your attention. General powers of the authority. The authority has all powers necessary to carry out the purpose of this part. To include, right? It's not exclusive to this list, but it's to include. So there may be other things, other powers you may want to exercise that don't fit within, that are enumerated here, but are going to be tied to your very purpose. And if you can make that connection, that nexus, that this power we need to exercise because it's part of our purpose, that it would be argued that you could exercise that power. But you can sue and be sued. So I think everyone's very excited to learn that that's a potential. Hot dang, we can be sued and we can sue others. You can execute contracts, receive and disperse money, both private funds and public funds. You can receive grants, loans, contributions. You can levy taxes. You can sell, lease, or otherwise dispose of real property. So there's some significant power that comes with this authority. The operation, permits, and eminent domain. You may establish, acquire, construct, purchase, improve, maintain, equip, operate, regulate, protect railroads and railroad facilities, including but not limited to terminal buildings, roadways, crossings, bridges, causeways, tunnels, equipment of rolling stock. So this is really your wheelhouse. This is where you have these authorities to operate basically a railroad. You can apply for public agencies for permits and approvals. You may acquire property for public use through through eminent domain. The authority may adopt, amend, and repeal reasonable resolutions, rules, and orders as is considered necessary for its own administration, management, and governance, as well as for the management, governance, and use of the railroad, rail authority owned and under your control. So the ability to manage yourselves as a governing body, as well as the authority to manage your purpose, the work that you do as an authority, external to the board. So you do have both of those rules, and you can have the power to create resolutions in that structure and that framework to operate a railroad as well as govern yourselves. You have the authority to authorize mill levies through the 1510 420 425. So it's got to go before the voters before they can you can access tax dollars through an assessment, through a tax levy. Not to say you can't get grants or allocations from the legislature. And wrapping up here, contracts for operations of the use of the facilities. So you can enter in the contracts and lease agreements. You have that authority to encumber yourselves that way. And you may remit funds available for investment to the state treasury. So if, and I'm sure it'll happen, you have so much money at your disposal that you can take some of that and have it invested with the state through the Board of Investments. So that's a good option. So it can sit there in a safe spot for you. You may borrow money for your corporate purposes, use bonds. You can be a bonding agency, which is good. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Debt service, you may create a debt service fund and accumulate in the fund a sum determined by the directors. So that's a decision if you want to do it, when you will do it, and then how to structure it when you do it. You are a tax exempt organization, so all your assets are exempt from taxation, and you may enlarge your boundaries. So as other counties decide to join in, they can do that. And there is some structure to it, but that might also be something you'll consider as you're developing your rules of procedure and bylaws. You'll take this broad authority granted to you by the MCA and figure out now how are we going to operationalize that as we move forward. Say Custer County wants to join next week. What's the process that Custer County has to go through in order to join? That might be a decision you need to create those steps. So with that, that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of the Montana Code annotated. This is what the law says in creating a rail authority. In that, from that MCA reference, Dave and his team created the resolution that then all of you signed off on and approved in your respective counties that resolution. It was based out of this, and we'll review that in just a moment. But I want to pause here for 8 to 10 seconds and just ask, does anyone have any questions about this initial broad strokes of the authorities granted to you by the state legislature in creating a rail authority?
Question from Prairie County.
Go ahead, Prairie County.
When it comes to being sued, can sue and be sued, will our property and casualty and liability that we have, let's say with Mako, would that cover us? Or do we have to have our own insurance?
That's a great question. So what you're saying is that the collective counties, so you're just using your county's policy. My initial guess, and I'm not an attorney, I do play one on TV. If you've seen me in any of the episodes on Law and Order. So I'm not an attorney, but my guess is the authority would have to acquire its own insurance for its own risk management for the actions of the authority, because the counties don't have control over the authority. There's a separation of powers there. So that's just my initial gut reaction.
Right, and I'm guessing that there's probably different entities that insure too.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, there may be, you're saying like Mako might be an option, but there may be other options for you as well that might specialize in railroad work. Yeah, it may be a challenge for them to underwrite something like this because it's not in their wheelhouse. They understand roads, but maybe not railroads. Yeah, that's a good question.
I would think that we'd want the answer to that pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll put that on the list. Other questions from the group?
Hey, Dan, this is Dave. Yeah, just to follow up on Commissioner Devlin's question, which is a good one. We have kicked around the idea, and this will warrant some additional discussion and certainly maybe some consultation with Mako. But we've also thought of this in terms of, are there ways in which through in-kind support a county could lend some assistance on the legal front to the authority, much like, for instance, counties might provide legal representation for other independent jurisdictions, such as a fire district, what have you. So that might be another possibility. Not so much maybe on the insurance front, but at least on the legal representation front, and definitely warrants some additional discussion, though.
Yeah. Yeah, Commissioner Devlin, you brought up, you know, what you brought up is some of that next 6 months discussion, right? What are all those questions we should be asking and coming up with the answers and inculcating that into some sort of a bylaws or governing document. And I think once that's done, a lot of those big questions are answered. It frees you up then to focus on the purpose of the authority to start being proactive. And so we don't want to spend too much time doing the governance and that work, because that's going to just suck the energy out of the board before you get into the exciting stuff. So we'll want to be fairly efficient at the work of that process. But I think these are really good questions, and I'm sure there's more questions that'll come up over time. And that's just as we consider this, like I mentioned, we don't have a real great example to pattern this from. this is the first time this law has been enacted in the state. We may look at some other authorities around the state and how they've set themselves up, as well as other authorities in other states, and try to cobble together some things. And so we're not reinventing the wheel if others have already done it. But I think that's a great comment, Commissioner. Any other questions on the MCA? All right. Well, just I'm sure that those county commissioners that are on the board have seen this and have read the resolution, and I'm not certain that those that are not county commissioners that are representing their county have had a chance to see this other than in the board packet. But I'll just quickly review again the purpose spelled out in the resolution. Now, as just to give you some framework, the state law, the MCA, gives you this broad authority. And then within that broad authority, it's basically saying you can do things within this bucket. And then the resolution that you've adopted is saying this is how this specific authority is going to operate and conduct itself. And so that resolution is going to be really important. You've got to tie back the things that you do to either the resolution or to the MCA. So this is another kind of a critical document that's going to be historical to this authority as you move forward. But again, the purpose and it's nearly ripped right out of the MCA, the authority to provide the preservation and improvement of abandoned rail service for agriculture, industry, and passenger traffic, and the preservation of abandoned railroad right-of-ways for future transportation uses when determined to be practical and necessary for public welfare. So that's again your purpose. You have these additional bullet points: health, safety, welfare, and economic prosperity of the region. Governance structure, investigate, analyze, and seek funding to develop long-distance passenger rail, and undertake and completed, and any undertakings completed by the MCA. So it gives you that broad flexibility. And so hopefully, as they've created that, there's not going to be a lot of daylight between the MCA and your resolution. I think that was their intent, is to get it just as matched as closely as possible. The name of the district is going to be the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. The authority may dissolve the authority pursuant to the rules established. So this is, it's not a perpetuity board, that at some point in the future, you decide it's not working for us. There is a mechanism that you can dissolve and go back, no harm, no foul. And again, that'll be spelled out, and I'm sure any liabilities that you have and assets that you have at that point would need to be dealt with. Powers of the authority will be vested in the board of directors, as it said in the law. The board membership will be equal to the number of counties in the authority, with one member appointed by each county. So that's how they're structuring the membership. So as additional counties join, they'll bring on a single additional member. The appointed board of directors must have an interest in furthering the mission of the authority and bringing varying expertise and knowledge to the authority. This is one of the beauties of this democratic process, is that we have geographically, ideologically, we're very diverse. And I believe that diversity of ideas, motivations, values, when we bring that together and we have a willingness to work together to understand each other's motivations and try to find some consensus around your mission and purpose with these varied backgrounds, I think some really rich outcomes, very creative, elegant ideas come from that process. And so I really want to encourage you to lean into that, and having diversity of thoughts, not a bad thing. Just relax, listen, try to understand, and engage in dialogue and conversation. How do we create this rail authority? And one of the things you'll need to do in the near future is also create some sort of a strategic plan that has a vision and has a mission that allows you to focus these conversations and tap into that diversity of your organization by focusing on that vision. Having something to say, that's what we're trying to accomplish. And so how geographically and ideologically diverse as we are, how do we collectively work together to accomplish that vision? And I think that's the real challenge, and that's the beauty of coming together and creating these things. I think great things come as a result of that. All right, so each director will be appointed for a term of 3 years. And you can discuss in your rules of procedure or bylaws, you know, are you gonna, how to create staggered terms? Is it gonna be, everybody's term is gonna expire in 3 years, we have to remake it, or hope everybody gets reappointed? So you'll have to work through some of those details. The boundary of the area includes for each county shall be the boundary of the county unless designated otherwise. So right now, the county boundaries are what constitutes the aggregate of the rail authority. So perpetual succession, you have that perpetual succession. So because you signed this resolution, you exist, and you will exist until you decide to not exist, right? Brings us back to that ability to dissolve yourself. So until you act to dissolve yourself, you exist.
Between 9 and 9:30 tomorrow morning?
Yeah. You can execute contracts,
Yep.
receive and disperse federal, state, and other funds, as we mentioned in the law, sell and lease and otherwise dispose of real property, borrow money, and issue bonds. So that in a nutshell is the resolution, which, like I mentioned, there's not a lot of daylight between your resolution and the MCA. Is there any questions about the resolution and what it says and what it means for you as a rail authority? All right. So seeing none, we'll continue to proceed.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
This is Dory. I couldn't get to my mute quick enough. I just thought I'd mention too, especially for people that maybe aren't familiar with the Teams, there's a chat function up at the top. And so if you have some questions that come up that you might want to put in there, that we could either Dan or Dave or someone could answer now, or possibly get back to you depending on how the time goes. So I just wanted to point that out, and we are recording the meeting too, and so hopefully that'll help us to kind of go back and go through and answer if there's some questions that come up. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you, Dory. That's part of that, some of that housekeeping I should have dealt with at the beginning.
And I see I still have my birthday background on.
Well, it looks very festive.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and Dory, if you and Dave don't mind, if you can just monitor that chat, and if something comes up, just holler or let me know. So again, we mentioned this, we talked about that, but that role of directors here and that the role of directors, this is from the MCA, and then the section that we had covered earlier in the resolution. That's not the right one, sorry. The role of the directors, yeah. So again, really what we're hoping is you're coming to the table as a member of the Big Sky Rail Authority with an interest in furthering the mission of the authority and bringing varying expertise and knowledge to the authority. And so this mission is yet to be determined, but if you're committed to the success and the ideals that are presented, at least in this initial resolution that getting passenger rail established, if you're committed to that, then we're happy to embrace you on the board. Thoughts or questions on that? All right, reviewing the map of the authority. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about the color scheme here and what your thoughts are in moving forward with the, I don't know if you can see the map very well.
It looks like you have an outdated map there.
Is this one
Dan?
Yeah, well, welcome to my world. I got like 6 of them on my computer. So
I did
send me
see
the new ones as they get updated. So I'm sorry.
I did see the most updated one when you were showing your various open screens. If you could pull up the map that has the routes in red, there it is.
That's the one I was looking for. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. So here you'll see depicted on the screen the counties to whom an initial invitation to participate in the rail authority was issued, and then the counties in green would be the counties that are represented here today, the 12 counties participating in the rail authority. The counties in gray, again, are the ones to whom an invitation was issued, but they're still on the fence as to whether or not to participate. Thankfully, to all of you, 12, you can consider yourself the founding members. The counties, just as by way of review, and many of you have probably heard this already, the counties that were extended an invitation to participate were counties that either once saw passenger rail service through the southern tier of the state, or we envision once again in the future might see that service. So you'll see some counties and potential rail corridors heading north-south from, say, Butte through Beaverhead County, which if you were to extend this down into Idaho and Utah, would connect you with Salt Lake City, or similarly through Carbon County or Bighorn County would potentially connect you with Denver. So in the spirit of keeping as many options on the table, those were also counties in those kind of north-south configurations of a rail corridor to whom an invitation was extended. As Dan mentioned earlier, one of the tasks as we're drafting bylaws will be to determine the process by which latecomers, if you will, any of these counties in gray who might want to participate and join the authority would be able to do so. We have started a draft of a latecomers resolution, and at some point we can share that with the authority to consider as one mechanism by which additional counties could join in. And then, of course, we have depicted the Empire Builder on here also, because Montana does have long distance passenger rail service currently, and I'm quick to add in any of these conversations that what we are about in reestablishing service through our authority jurisdiction is by no means meant to replace or supplant the Empire Builder, which already exists in Montana. This is not a zero-sum game by which our gain will be the loss elsewhere in the state, but it's to recognize that there's an opportunity here to enhance what we have already in the state of Montana. Thanks, Dan.
Yep. Thank you, Dave. Any thoughts or comments on the map? Okay. And I think that's where I ended the presentation. I was going to quickly just, as I mentioned earlier about the open meeting law and the citizen participation law, I think I have a quick here. As I mentioned earlier, you are a public entity, a public body, an agency of subdivision of government. And so all the same laws and rules that govern any public board in the state applies to this rail authority. So if you think about what constitutes a meeting, whenever a quorum is convened and you're hearing, discussing, or acting on something within your jurisdiction. And it's an or, not an and. So you could have a quorum of this authority discussing something within your jurisdiction. And in that case, you've created a meeting. If you have a quorum discussing something or hearing a comment from someone or deciding, any one of those three things constitutes a meeting: hearing, discussing, or acting. So when there's a quorum doing those three things, and a quorum could be convened either electronically like this through Zoom, over a phone call, but the one that's, and this is where the public on a phone call or on a Zoom or an online platform, the public can participate in that. This is within the framework of the law. What is not within the framework of the law is if you're hearing, discussing, or acting via email or text messaging. So you've got to be very careful as emails are sent out that you don't end up responding reply all and having some sort of a substantive discussion via email on something within your jurisdiction. That all has to be done out in the public sphere for the public to see. The public in Montana wants to see the sausage being made. So you've got to do that all out in the open and being transparent. So just be careful that you don't inadvertently create a quorum of deliberating, having some sort of a meeting while you're discussing or acting over electronic means outside of some forum like this. So in order to have a legal meeting, you need to have a quorum, hear, discuss, or act. The meeting needs to be publicly noticed, minutes need to be taken, and public comment needs to be allowed. The public has a right to comment on anything that's on your agenda and not on the agenda within your jurisdiction. So those are the 5 things that have to take place within every public meeting. So I'm sure you're going to have some support in making sure that many of those, the noticing and the minutes are taken care of. Public comment will be taken care of during the, whoever is going to chair the meetings. The real thing is to just watch as a group that you don't inadvertently create a meeting via some sort of an email or text stream. You can correspond on an administrative level, but not on something that you're going to be having some sort of substantive discussion on. So if you hit reply all and said, "Is the meeting start at 10:30 instead of 10?" That's not creating a quorum or conducting business of the people. It's just trying to find out and answer that specific question that's administrative. But if you say, "Hey, I heard from so-and-so that they think this grant is available and we should apply for it," now you've walked into that realm of discussing something within your jurisdiction. So anyway, for those of you that aren't steeped in this and do this as an elected official in your community, I know some of you have had previous elected office experience, but I just wanted to make sure people feel comfortable for that. The other thing I want to highlight here, and I want to just watch the time, but each agency, which we established you are an agency, shall develop procedures for, so these bylaws, the rules of procedure that you will be creating need to make sure that this is covered, this permitting and encouraging. Oops, I just want to highlight this word, 2 things, that you need to permit the public an opportunity to participate, but not just permit. You also have a statutory obligation to encourage the public to participate. And not just in one, they say it not just once. The legislature goes on to say, let me get rid of that. So you're permitting and encouraging the public to participate in the agency's decisions that are of significant interest to the public. I would just say anything that you're going to be discussing and deciding is of significant interest. Don't try to figure out, well, that's not significant, because you don't know what is significant to some individuals. So just liberally construe that, liberally think about that in a very broad context. The next sentence, it says the procedures must ensure adequate notice. So they need to be noticed adequately. So what is it that you're going to hear, discuss, and act on with enough detail that the public is aware that, okay, I know they're going to be discussing, say, this grant opportunity or the purchase of this rail line or whatever it might be. It has to have sufficient detail in that noticing in your agenda when you notice that for the public to decide whether they want to participate and engage or not. So the procedures must ensure adequate notice and assist, there again, assist the public participation before final agency action. So you are to encourage and assist the public to participate. And I just want to highlight that for you to help you recognize that there is an expectation in the state of Montana that you as an agency representing the constituents, the people in your county and community in the state, you have an obligation to those people that you serve, that you are here facilitating on behalf of the public of the state of Montana some sort of public good. And in this case, a rail authority. You are not a private company, a private organization that's interested in rail and rail service. You are a public entity providing a public good for the benefit of the public of the state of Montana. So in that light and in that spirit, you're doing this out in the open and being very transparent. All right, one last thing. I hope I'm not sounding preachy. I don't like doing this over the internet, so I'm much more pleasant in person. All right, then last, here's where I mentioned this meeting defined. Again, this is in the law. A meeting means the convening of a quorum of the membership of a public agency, whether corporal or by means of electronic equipment. So either in person or by electronic commitment or equipment. So we're in a way doing both of that. We're connected electronically, but we can see everybody here. To hear, discuss, or act upon a matter over which the agency has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So that's where, when I made that big deal about hear, discuss, or act. It's not and, but it's or. So any one of those three constitutes a meeting. Any questions on that? Oh, this is so much fun. I always say, if you're not having fun doing this stuff, you're not doing it right. Okay. So next, the developing a timeline. So this is going to be more of that discussion. Let me just pause a quick question. Is there any questions or comments yet before we move on to the next section of the law or the agenda?
I have a question. This is Liz. I'm calling from Bozeman.
Go ahead, Liz.
Hey, sorry, I'm not on your electronic feed there. Couldn't get on it today. I was just curious if there's a schedule for the board or the authority to meet and a timeline for when bylaws are set and things start to move forward more.
That is a great question. In fact, that's going to be, well, a minute ago. We're so far behind on our agenda, but that's okay. Yeah, great question, Liz. And yes, that'll be one of the things we'll need to talk about before we finish here, which is going to be shortly. So we'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, that's one of the things, establishing a meeting and time and a place. Here's this list. All these things really are what needs to be done by the board moving forward fairly quickly. You need to determine officers. We could either today appoint, you can decide if there's going to be a temporary presiding officer until such time you can formally create your presiding officer, vice presiding officer, secretary, and treasurer. Just somebody to facilitate the meetings, to facilitate the public comment. It's something I'm willing to do while we're still trying to get you stood up as a board. But it would be great if one of you would be willing to step forward and serve as a temporary presiding officer. So I guess I'll pause right now. Is there a member of the board that would be willing to take on the responsibility of being the temporary presiding officer? This is where we play the Jeopardy music.
Dan, could I say something?
Go ahead.
Paul Pacini and Helena. I would really like to nominate David Strohmeyer if he would be willing to do that.
Yeah, Dave, you willing to do that?
I second that, by the way.
I see a Jerry McDonald out there with his hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to recommend Dave as well, and I would second the motion.
So do you hear the chain coming there, Dave? It's going to run you right over.
I hear the whistle blowing. I would be happy to serve as the temporary presiding officer until we determine permanent appointments.
Great. Is there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, we'll go ahead and appoint David as the temporary presiding officer by acclamation, since there's no choice there. Thank you, Dave, for stepping up and jumping off the track there.
Don't talk about anything jumping off the track yet.
So you can see there's still a lot to be done, organizing interim subcommittees and creating and adopting bylaws. There's a lot of work for the board yet to be done. But looking at the time and trying to honor the time, why don't we just drop down to this section here, time and date. So we've got almost an entire the entire board here participating. Is there a date and a time, and how often do you want to meet? Do you want to meet monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, quarterly. I think, and I'll just throw this out there, I think initially it would help if you were to meet more frequently to get all this governance stuff structured and organized and establish some momentum. And then you may want to move to a longer time horizon in between meetings. But I would encourage you, I think having the next meeting, we can certainly organize yourselves into committees and start working on these different policies to govern yourselves by. So is there any thoughts or motions on the floor or suggestions that Dave can facilitate, as the chair, work through? So go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. I really think that as we try to get this off the ground and get some forward momentum, we really should be meeting more frequently. So I would say we certainly want to meet no more. We certainly want to have our next meeting no more than a month from now, and I think certainly at least once every month until we get everything kind of settled. At least until we get everything settled and the base built up here.
Does anyone have a contrary idea? Oh, I should probably let you be doing this, Dave.
No,
anyone argue against that?
Yeah, this is Terry Jennings. Can I bring up a point here?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to suggest that we meet every other week while we get this going, because I do think that there is a lot of work here. There's a load that we're going to have to bear. And I think that to be able to move on with adopting plans and rules and how we're going to move forward is going to have to come before we establish any goals moving forward. I don't know if that'd be every other week for 2 months, 3 months, whatever the case may be, but I do think time is of the essence. So I would suggest every 2 weeks.
Yeah, this is Jerry McDonald. I'd second that motion to meet every other week.
So if that is the case, that we would be meeting, try to get a quorum of us together the week after next, what would, and any druthers as far as, I don't know if folks are in a position right now to nail down a day and time, or we could do a similar sort of doodle poll with a number of options that could be presented to the group and try to nail that down in the next day or so. Any thoughts there?
Well, point of order, Dave. Just a question, what type of, given that it will be a public meeting, what type of notification do we have to give? Is 2 weeks enough?
I believe so. Dan, do you want to speak to both that and also a question that I have and probably others have is that given the fact that we span probably over 500 miles across the state of Montana and 12 counties, what would be considered adequate public notice of the meetings and what our agenda might be?
Yeah. You know, in thinking about that, I would recommend, and maybe Dory has some thoughts to add to it or to contradict what I'm saying, but I think the law requires a minimum of 48 hours notice, but that time should increase with the relative importance of the decisions being made. So I think at this point, there's nothing really major that's on the docket. 48 hours notice would be sufficient, but in order to encourage participation, I think even more would be better. The more would be better. I would recommend that in each that a public meeting notice, a standard public meeting notice would be developed, shared across all the counties, that you would notice where all of your other official noticing takes place at the county level. And then also I would suggest placing that in all of the 6 or 7 major newspapers in the state. And that would then, like you're saying, Dave, cover, if, from the Butte Standard, the IR, Missoulian, I don't know what it is in Flathead, but the Chronicle, Bozeman, or the Billings Gazette, and the Tribune, you know, you hit those and then notice it on in your normal public meeting space, noticing spaces, I would think would be adequate.
Thanks, Dan. Jason, you still have your hand up. Did you have a question or comment?
No, I didn't know I had my hand up. I didn't have a question.
Okay.
I do every 2 weeks I think is also good. Yeah, more frequently the better right now, I think.
And I think as Dan may have alluded, it's not going to be easy getting all 12 of us together at the same time. And that certainly is always going to be the goal, to try to accommodate folks' schedules, but we will do our best to get a time arranged that will work for everyone, recognizing that that may not be the case in all situations, that everyone's going to be present. So I guess, again, going back to, since we're wanting to be respectful of folks' time, and everyone may not have their day planner right in front of them, would it work for folks if by, say, tomorrow we were able to get out an electronic doodle poll to everyone and try to narrow in on what a day and time might work for everyone? I'm getting a few visual thumbs up. Are there any objections to that? I guess maybe that would be the easier way to approach it. Okay. Very good. And Dan, I know in one of your screens that you just had flashed up, there are a number of items that we might have discussed further today, but are just not having time to get to, which might make for good agenda topics for our next meeting. And one of them might be whether or not to try to configure some initial subcommittees, because there's going to be some work that needs to be done on bylaws, for instance, that might be best to hammer out in a smaller group of folks rather than simply punting to the next full board meeting. Did you have some additional thoughts there, Dan?
Well, yeah, and I think pushing it down to smaller committees to work on that. I think there's a lot of work to go around, and it could be that we have smaller groups working on different segments of bylaws. There's a lot of ways that you can slice and dice this and then bring it back and then debate what those smaller groups developed and decide what goes in your final document. But I think trying to be creative about making this efficient and establishing some level of trust amongst yourselves that you know, we trust you to make good decisions on our behalf and being transparent in that process. I'll also mention, someone did say that, and maybe this is something we can start working on, is establishing an email listserv, so to speak. And that would be another way of interested people. They could have a way to give their emails to the authority, that when you announce your meetings, you can then send out an email blast to all those that have signed up. So that's another one of those kind of housekeeping things that, you know, it just takes time to establish and organize and get, you know, written down. Those are all the little details that you'll need to work on.
And I guess in the spirit of the chicken and the egg sort of scenario or place that we're at in the process here, in order to have an electronic platform for folks to access meeting minutes or agendas and such, we at Missoula County would be happy to at least provide something initially to get started on that front. Unless someone else is chomping at the bit to provide that, it seems like that would be a useful thing for us to have access to sooner rather than later, and we could probably get that in place relatively soon. Okay, and in terms of just thinking about possible committee or subcommittee roles and participation, again, we're out of time today, and folks have not had a lot of time to think about this, but it seems like some logical subcommittees might be some of the ones that Dan has displayed on the screen here, such as rules of procedure, bylaws, finance committee, and such. Communications, we're certainly going to have to deal with and figure out how we're going to communicate to folks electronically and otherwise, developing a website, web presence and such. Maybe between now and when we next meet, keep these ideas in mind. And if there are other subcommittees that are worth contemplating establishing, we can discuss that at our next meeting. And if you have a particular area of interest, if you're really hankering to be on a finance committee or help develop bylaws, which Dan's so enticingly put out there for us, then we can maybe at that next public meeting that we have, throw our collective hats in whatever rings that we're most interested in. What are we missing here, Dan?
I think we're pretty good. You know, our intent was just an initial orientation for everybody. Everyone gets on the same page. And I think moving forward, it's going to be a roll up your sleeves and let's kind of frame this thing out. And just also know that it's an iterative process. It's going to be a learning process. And so you'll be adding new resolutions and defining more who you are and how you conduct yourselves as time goes by. So just know that you don't have to, get it complete the first out of the gate. It's going to be a process. So just be open to that. Be patient as you work to define who you are and the role and scope of the work you accomplish in that context. So, so I think we're good.
Yeah, one last thing I'll just throw out to folks and chime in either pro or con. But a lot of what we're talking about right now, and probably will for the next meeting or two, is pretty process heavy. And if folks would be interested, it would be nice to at least insert some more substance of what passenger rail reestablishment might look like into the conversation, and recognizing we absolutely need to deal with the process and procedural and parliamentary questions. But for instance, I received an offer from an official from Amtrak recently to provide to the authority a short passenger rail 101 sort of presentation. And if folks would think that would be interesting, we could certainly carve out half an hour or some portion of our next meeting to weave that into the discussion. So we're not just, the intent is not to have everyone drift into a coma because the process stuff is so painful. But does that sound at all of interest to folks? In which case I would be happy to try to set that up. Okay.
Think of it as having your ice cream and eating Brussels sprouts. You got to eat your Brussels sprouts, but we're going to sprinkle a little bit of ice cream in this process too. So
and we can keep them in separate bowls if you would like.
Yes. For fear of offending the Brussels Sprouts Growers of America Association, we'll throw them under the bus. Not the train, just the bus. I think we're good, Dave. I can't.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for taking an hour and a half out of your day on what I think is a pretty historically significant day to kick this off. So unless there are any further comments or business to attend to today, last chance, anyone? Okay, we will be adjourned, and this meeting is being recorded. One of our staff members is taking minutes, so we will distribute the links to the recording and the minutes before our next meeting, and we'll try to get out a doodle poll sometime tomorrow for folks to indicate when they can circle up in a couple weeks. Well, have a great day, everyone, and stay healthy. Yeah. Happy New Year.
See you, everybody.
Yeah. Happy New Year, Dave, everyone.
Goodbye.